Welcome to Payoff Pitch Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined by Sean Zerillo. We're going to break down the Friday slate in the bigs. We're also going to have some instant gratification gambling from our good friend Billy Ward. That means YRFIs and NRFIs to consider on Friday. But let's start with a little game of guest general manager, Sean. I'm going to put you in the seat of Brian Cashman, and I want your thoughts on what the Yankees potentially could do as buyers moving forward into the summer. Most people thought that the Yanks were absolutely screwed coming into this season. They don't have Cole. They're going to lose Heel for an extended period of time. The thought was they just didn't have the staff to compete in a really deep AL East. Well, Max Fried is a Cy Young threat at this point. Carlos Rodon has been excellent, really, for an extended period of time, the past month for sure. And according to Fangraphs, when you look at it, they say that they have an 86% chance of making the playoffs and an AL best 11% chance to win the World Series. If you were in Cashman's shoes, who are you starting, or who are you targeting, I should say, as a starting pitching option in that 3 or 4 slot in their rotation?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they have the prospect depth to actually go out and get these guys, nor am I sure what teams will be in the mix come trade deadline time. But if Framber Valdez or Dylan Cease are available, I think those are probably the top 2 trade targets for any team for their rotation, especially the Yankees, who would want to replace Cole with a power right-handed pitcher. You have Clark Schmidt, you have Will Warren. These guys are a bit more of finesse righties. You know, Dylan Cease gives you that power righty, high velocity against other good hitting in the playoffs. Velocity is extremely important come playoff time, and being able to hit high velocity is extremely important come playoff time. You just face better pitchers who throw harder in general than you see in the regular season. So getting a big, powerful arm like Cease in there, I think kind of complements Fried and Rodon to a degree. I don't know if adding a third lefty takes anything away from you. Now, being fully set up with 3 left-handed starters against an opposing offense, I don't actually have the data. I'm sure these team analytics departments do, but I don't personally have the data on whether there's a diminishing effect throwing 3 of the same handedness of starter back-to-back games against an opposing offense, going with 3 lefties or 3 righties, etc. I would imagine it helps to change up the handedness start to start, kind of thinking back to like Tim Wakefield back in the day with the Red Sox, how the starter after him seemed to have a little bit more success because teams were going from normal velocity to lower velocity and then back up to normal velocity. Like within those starts, even the relievers behind Wakefield who threw harder, they seem to have more of a positive effect just because of the velocity bands and the velocity separation. So maybe the righty versus lefty thing makes Cease a better target for the Yankees. Guys who I think will actually be available come trade deadline for any team. Sandy Alcantara, who we've talked about a bunch this year, his stuff is back, but the command is not, and the command has been really rough. I do expect the command to come back at some point. He's throwing the ball really hard. The stuff lines up with where he was before injury. You're just taking a big downside risk. 1, that he gets hurt again, and then 2, that the command just does not come back. The other guy who has good command, doesn't necessarily have good stuff, is Zach Eflin. And it seems like the Orioles are in for a long season. They've already lost the rest of their rotation. Eflin should be back from the IL soon, but the Orioles are, I believe, 13-20. They're well below 500. Seems like they are probably pushing themselves out of the playoff race at this point. And if they're resetting for 2026, Eflin is a pending free agent. So I think Eflin is likely to get traded for the second consecutive year and maybe even get traded within the same division for the second consecutive year after going from Tampa Bay to Baltimore. He seems like a very good high floor guy, but also I don't know how much better he is than a Clark Schmidt, if at all. So is that really an upgrade, or is that just kind of adding more depth to your rotation? That's why if they're going to add somebody impactful, I think it should be somebody like a Dylan Cease who actually throws the ball hard and has that ace level, number 2 level upside, where Eflin is more of a safe number 3 guy that doesn't necessarily have that ace level, upside in him.
Yeah, it's a bummer for Stavros and those Oriole fans out there. It looks like it's already white flag time. Start to thinking about enriching your farm system, targeting 2026, and turning their attention to the Baltimore Ravens, who certainly are going to be a contender in the AFC. All right, let's turn now.
If I remember correctly, David Rubenstein, who bought the team, when he bought the team last year, I said, this is a guy who has a history of coming into organizations, businesses, and making them more efficient, cutting costs, downsizing. That's what he's done with the Orioles. Everybody expected him to go out and make all these moves, sign Corbin Burns. Like, they traded for Corbin Burns the moment he got there, but they never extended him. And maybe ultimately, that's going to be a good move in the long run, considering Burns is already dealing with arm soreness and his numbers are down this year. But by and large, they just have not been active in terms of spending. And the owner is a guy historically throughout his life who has cut costs in businesses he's gone into. So just worth keeping in mind. They finally got away from the Angelos ownership. People were excited for new owners to spend money. This guy seems like he's just trying to run the team and make a profit.
We transition out of playing general manager cosplay into what people are generally tuning in for in this program, which is your best bet. The Giants basically at even money here against the Minnesota Twins. They just took 2 of 3 on the north side against the Cubs. They continue this Midwestern road trip in the Twin Cities. After a hellacious April, Jordan Hicks gave up 17 runs across 3 consecutive starts. He looked like he was trending towards getting, sent down for assignment into the minors, but he's settled in. He remains a ground ball pitcher, throwing a sinker more than half of the time. You like him here against a middling Twins lineup. Walk me through it.
Yeah, and Chris Paddock, I think, is a significantly worse starting pitcher relative to Jordan Hicks. Now, both of these guys have a very high ERA. Hicks at 6, Chris Paddock at 5.6. But the underlying indicators are completely different. Hicks a 3.5 expected ERA, 3.7 expected FIP, 3.5 body ERA. Paddock's numbers are all over 5. 5 expected ERA, 5.5 expected FIP, strikeout minus walk rate of 5%, which is a career low. I think Chris Paddock is still living off of the prospect pedigree that he had when he first came up. The nickname, the sheriff, the cowboy hats, he was a cool dude, got traded to Minnesota, has dealt with injuries, and has never really proven himself out as that higher end starting pitcher, as an above average starting pitcher within baseball, essentially for the vast majority of his career. He has good command. There is not a single pitch in his arsenal, that grades over 100 stuff plus. So the body array grades well because his location, his command grades well, but nothing coming out of his hand is something difficult for the hitters to actually put the bat on the ball with. Jordan Hicks, as I said, the underlying indicators below 4, the actual ERA above 6. He has a 333 BABIP and a 57% strain rate. Both of those are extremely unlucky. 293 for his career and 70% for his career. That's both of where those numbers should eventually regress to. We'll talk about a number of pitchers on the show today who have either been very unlucky or very lucky in BABIP and in strain rate, both of which are categories which always regress either towards league average or towards a pitcher's career averages. So 333 BABIP, 57% strain rate for Hicks, both of which should drastically improve. Now, I do give the Twins the better offense here by about 5 points in terms of WRC+. These are 2 very good bullpens, but the Twins have used their 2 best relievers, Yohan Duran and Griffin Jax, on consecutive days. So I give the Giants a bullpen edge here tonight, give them a significant starting pitching edge, Twins slight offensive edge, but I much prefer the Giants defensively. The Twins do not have a particularly good or athletic roster. Royce Lewis just came back. Buxton can play good defense in center field. But beyond that, beyond those 2 guys, beyond Willie Castro, there's really not that many athletes or good defenders here, good base runners. There's a lot of slow plotting guys that can hit the ball, but in terms of athleticism, defense, it just does not grade out super well. So give me the Giants. I make them as high as minus 120. I think I put minus 115 out there officially, but I can get them as high as minus 120 in this matchup. Comfortable with the Giants up to minus 110 today. This line to me was fair if Joe Ryan was starting for the Twins. Joe Ryan's not starting till tomorrow. He got scratched yesterday. Bailey Ober took over. It was 50-50 whether it was going to be Ryan or Paddock today. When this line was put up last night, I waited assuming this was going to be for Ryan, and then the Twins confirmed it was Chris Paddock. So again, this line was fair to me if Joe Ryan was starting. It is not fair with Chris Paddock out there.
Before we hopped on, you actually gave me 2 options for the underdog card, but there's been some significant line movement. So let's start with the one that you feel most confident in, and that's one of baseball's biggest letdowns in 2025, the Toronto Blue Jays. They've lost 5 of their last 6 series, but I get the immediate appeal of Kevin Gausman as an underdog. The veteran righty struck out 9 and allowed just 2 base runners in 6 innings worth of work in his last start. So walk me through why it's a good time to buy the Jays at plus 120.
Yeah, I think Gausman is showing that he's clearly back to where he was 2 years ago. Last year is the obvious outlier in his profile, 4.7 expected ERA. Velocity on all of his pitches was down, not a full tick, but 0.7 of a mile an hour last season across the board. His stuff plus plummeted, not plummeted, but went from above 100 to below 100 for the first time in his career. Now it's back up, went from 95 to 102 year over year. His body ERA back down from about 4.7 to 3.8. So everything for Gausman back in the right direction. Everything for Luis Castillo moving in the wrong direction. Castillo has a 3.3 ERA, but his expected indicators and his strikeout minus walk rate are all at career worse, alongside a career low in velocity. So Luis Castillo, I think, is a guy who's obviously declining. The Mariners spent the entire offseason trying to trade him for bats, ultimately didn't get the nibbles that they wanted and ended up holding on to him. I mean, they have a ton of starting pitching. They were just looking to upgrade their offense. I don't know if they knew that this decline was coming, but it is very apparent. Last year, Luis Castillo, 3.9 expected ERA, 3.8 expected FIP, 3.95 body ERA, 17.8%, call it 18% strikeout minus walk rate. This year, 4.1 expected ERA, 4.6 expected FIP, 4.3 body ERA, and an 8.5% strikeout minus walk rate. So the K minus walk percentage has halved. Everything else, all the underlying indicators have gone up about a half a run, quarter of a run in terms of the expected ERA. I now think Luis Castillo has moved from above average starting pitcher to league average, if not below average starting pitcher on those numbers. Again, the velocity down from 95.6 to 94.8, which is now 2 ticks below his career average. It went down a little bit last year. It's gone down even further in 2025. So I'm mostly against Castillo. I've been against him in virtually every start this season. I've been on Gausman a bunch, but I think this is more so a fade of Castillo. Now, all of that said, I did put out an updated futures projection on Wednesday, I believe. The Mariners should not be plus money to win the AL West at this point. They built up enough of the lead. They built up enough projections across the market that every projection system thinks they should be at least 51% to win the division, and minus 105. I think the consensus odds were closer to minus 130. So I'd wait at least a day, obviously, because I'm betting on the Jays today. I make the Jays minus 105. I would bet them down to about plus 105. But in terms of betting this division, betting futures, I actually think the Mariners offer quite a bit of value. Their offense is substantially better than it was last year. They still have Logan Gilbert and George Kirby coming back in the very near future. No guarantee those guys are healthy throughout the remainder of the year, but if they are, this may be the best rotation in baseball. And I say that knowing the Phillies are putting up historic numbers right now, but come playoff time, I would probably take Kirby, Gilbert, Wu, and Miller against Wheeler, Luzardo, Sanchez, Nola. It's close. It's very close. Phillies and Mariners in terms of best rotation once everybody's back healthy for Seattle. But in terms of futures, AL West plus money, and then also AL pennant, I think the Mariners are probably worthy of an investment in the very near future. Mariners, Tigers, and then the Rays were the one team who's more of a long shot that I think all have very talented rosters and are in good positions in terms of their projections relative to the market right now.
In the NL West, there's an underdog that you liked at a particular price point that has evaporated, but I'd still like to touch on it real quick. Erod against Sasaki between Arizona and the Dodgers. Rodriguez just posted his second double-digit strikeout performance of the season, whereas Sasaki has been scattering hits across his last 2 starts. He's given up 11 hits over 10 2/3 innings worth of work. I know in the preseason, you thought that he was a bit overrated and he would settle in more towards a number 2 as opposed to kind of an ace of a rotation. Obviously, the Dodgers are loaded in terms of their overall roster, but where do you land on him in this particular matchup? And what was the number that you were circling to play Arizona as an underdog?
Yeah, I make this about Arizona minus 105. So I wanted plus 103, or actually I make the minus 110. So I wanted minus 102, would be okay. I think I put 108 in the app last night. I had a way of making it more aggressive. I left it a little bit more conservative. I kind of upgraded Sasaki. That said, I probably shouldn't have, because his velocity is down from 98 to 94.9 since the start of the season. His slider is down from 84.9 to 81.6. Like, he started out rough, and the stuff has now gone away completely. The command is not there, and now the stuff is gone too. His splitter grades out really well, 111 stuff plus, but the fastball's awful. 77 stuff plus on his fastball and 90 on his slider. So completely underwhelming, Roki Sasaki, relative to expectations. Forget number 2 starter. This guy is not even a league average, not even a number 5 starter right now. He is a replacement level starting pitcher. You see that ERA under 4, but a 5.5 expected ERA, 5.6 body ERA, and a 3% strikeout minus walk rate. And as I just said, the velocity on his pitches is down drastically where it was from his first couple of starts of the year, like 2-3 ticks. So injury is a major concern. When he was in Japan last year, his numbers dipped and his velocity dipped. And everybody was saying, what caused Roki Sasaki's fall off? Even in the WBC before that, the velocity, the stuff had calmed down. Like, he was best pitching prospect in the world when he threw those 2 perfect games or 2 no-hitters when he was 21. Over time, his stuff and his velocity has diminished. People thought it might be a mechanical issue. It seems like there may be injury concerns underlying in there. So overall, I'd be extremely concerned about betting on Roki going forward. I'd be concerned if I were the Dodgers about his health, especially because the Dodgers cannot keep any pitchers healthy. Eduardo Rodriguez, however, you see an ERA near 6. His strikeout rate is the highest it's been in about 5 years. And we're already at the point, now 7 starts in, where you could say that is relatively sustainable going forward. There is a reason for that too. He's pulled back on his cutter a little bit. He's throwing his slider a little bit more. So I think going to more of a strikeout pitch and strikeout counts, trying to induce weak contact less, is increasing that strikeout rate. And he's been unlucky in terms of batting average on balls in play and strand rate. 350 BABIP, 58% strand rate. His career marks are 305 and 73%. So Eduardo has actually pitched quite well, just been unlucky. Roki Sasaki has gotten worse as the year has gone on. Now, that said, this line flipped, Mike. I bet Arizona at plus 115. They're currently minus 115. I would bet the Dodgers, or at least consider them, at plus 115, which it's already getting to plus 110. But considering how aggressively this flipped, I would tend to think that Ohtani or Betts or Freeman or somebody is sitting tonight. Like, that's the only possible explanation for why it moved this much. It going to even money from plus 115, sure. It going from plus 115 to minus 115, somebody's sitting out. I would not touch this game until you see lineups. You know, if you use my projections in the app or on actionnetwork.com, I'm using the Dodgers full lineup right now. I would tend to think that somebody's sitting out tonight. If they have a fully healthy lineup, you know, with Sasaki and the line gets the Dodgers plus 115, I might arb it out a little bit, take half of it off, or try to play Dodgers spread, something like that, and try to middle the game. If you don't have a bet on it at all, you know, and the Dodgers have a fully healthy lineup, Dodgers plus 115, jump in. You know, I'm betting these games based off of numbers. I'm not sitting here saying this side is the side all the way up to minus 900. Like, I'm betting numbers. I'm trying to bet the difference in win probability. A move from plus 115 to minus 115 is absolutely massive. I know Sasaki's been awful. But that said, you would still probably have to play the Dodgers straight blind at plus 115, regardless of whether you've already bet the other side. So just keep an eye on the lineups for this game. That is very drastic line movement overnight. Oh, I can't believe I didn't mention this. I completely buried the lead on this one. My favorite aspect about this game is the weather. The Diamondbacks left the roof open last night in 95-degree temperatures. They said they're going to open the roof tonight. I think they're trying to sweat the Dodgers out. I legitimately do think they're trying to create more offense and inject more offense into these games by leaving the roof open in 100-degree temperatures. I don't know if it'll ultimately be open tonight. Even at the start of the game last night on MLB.com, it said roof closed, but on the Diamondbacks official webpage, it said roof will be open. And watching the game, the roof was open. So, you know, keep an eye on the roof tonight as well, because if they open the roof, my total would probably go up to 10.3. Right now, it's at about 9.8. The market is around 10, but it moved down from 10 to 9.5. I would assume that's because groups out there thought there's no way this roof is open tonight. You know, with these temperatures, by all indications, it will be. So that is kind of fascinating considering the temperatures in Phoenix right now. It's going to be 100 degrees during the day today. I don't know. I'm not like a dry heat guy. I live in New York. You know, I have the humidity here. So when it's hot, it's like hot and sticky. I don't know how 98 with no humidity feels compared to 98 with humidity. I don't know if it's livable for sitting in a ballpark. It doesn't seem like it would be comfortable. But yeah, like the weather is super key here tonight. The Dodgers lineup, super key here tonight. Consider the over if that roof is open.
Before we get to Billy Ward's YRFI Nerfies, we're going to speed run through the rest of your card. You have 6 potential games to double click into. Let's start with the Phillies. Their bats are hot. They're coming off a sweep of the Rays at Steinbrenner Field, where they scored 22 runs in 3 games. Now they're top 5 in the NL in average slugging OPS. They're drawing the Guardians here and sending Aaron Nola to the hill. He's recovered from just a nightmare April where he lost 4 straight starts. Are you buying on him in particular after he silenced the Snakes' bats and really had command of his entire pitching repertoire? He struck out 8 batters against Arizona using 5 different pitches per baseball savant. What are your thoughts on Nola and the Phillies priced at about minus 125 here?
Yeah, Nola's fine. He hasn't gotten worse, I don't think, relative to previous years. It's just that the rotation around him has gotten better and sort of pushed him down in terms of the hierarchy, where he's now their 4th best starter. That said, the strikeout minus walk rate still around 18%, which is where it's been in the past few seasons. Nola's very much fine and somebody I trust as much as I've trusted in recent years. Not a guy I generally bet on a ton. I think this is more so a bet against Gavin Williams, who's been squeezed as much as anybody else by the new strike zone this season. Williams has a 13% walk rate. It was near 10% last season. He has a 102 stuff plus figure. He seemed like a breakout candidate in the spring, but he's just getting pinched like crazy. And the Phillies offense has been one of the best teams year over year in improving their plate discipline. They went from 23rd last year in swing rate to 12th this season, a similar improvement in terms of their chase rate. Overall, it's not just they're not swinging at pitches in the zone. They've mostly stopped chasing pitches outside of the zone. Now, their bullpen had to get used relatively aggressively last night. They had a come from behind win in Tampa Bay. Guardians, I believe, had the day off, so the Guardians bullpen should be in a bit better shape tonight. But I still make the Phillies about minus 135 in this game, would bet them up to minus 125. I think the Guardians, as I said, I ran updated futures projections the other day. The Guardians to miss the playoffs was one of the best bets on the board in the preseason. It remains one of the best bets on the board in season. You can currently get minus 105 on the Guardians to miss the playoffs. The highest projection out there, the most optimistic projection, has them at 45% to make the playoffs. So still an edge relative to that number. Most projections are closer to 30% on this team, and the consensus was around minus 190 to miss the playoffs. So Guardians to miss right now, minus 105, I think is probably one of the better futures bets out there. We talked about it in the preseason. It remains one of the better projected bets. It seems unlikely that the AL Central or the NL Central, for that matter, gets more than one playoff team each. With the White Sox playing much better this season, it lowers the ceiling, or lowers the floor really too, for all of these AL Central teams if the White Sox are going to win a few more games this year. So yeah, Phillies up to minus 125. Then I make this total around 7.2. If you can get an under 7.5 at even money, or a juiced under 8 to about minus 120, I think both of those are fine as well. Good wind and weather here for an under. It's going to be a real feel in the 40 degrees at first pitch with 6-mile-an-hour winds blowing in from left field. So pretty good pitching weather in Cleveland today. Under 7.5, and then Phillies to minus 125.
Let's talk another under, this time between the Cubs and the Mets. A soggy day in Queens on tap, wind blowing in from left center, and a good pitching matchup. So it's that simple, right? You got to go with under.
Yeah, we'll see if they play this game. It's raining as hard here right now as it can rain. Like, I'm surprised the show is not picking up the noise of the rain bouncing off my roof at the moment. So I don't know if they're going to get totally flooded at Citi Field today, if it's going to lighten up later. It should be raining still this evening. I just don't know how strong it's going to be. But besides that, 59 degrees at first pitch, 9-mile-an-hour winds blowing in from right field at first pitch. But as I've discussed on the show, it's going to be that swirling Citi Field wind that sort of changes direction and swirls around the entire ballpark during the game. And when the winds are doing that there, it actually starts blowing the wind in from all aspects of the ballpark. It's a very freaky design flaw, or whatever you want to call it, but the architecture of that stadium causes the wind to swirl around and blow in from all directions when it's blowing in from almost anywhere. So you can see on like the weather apps and stuff today, like the wind direction changed 3 times throughout the game. That's basically what's going to happen, but it's still going to end up pushing in. I think the biggest note about the Mets that I want to leave here is the David Stearns blueprint in full effect at this point. Number 1 in bullpen rankings, or up there nearly everywhere, but also the defense. This team is 7th in defensive runs saved this year. They were 15th last year. They were 25th the year before. David Stearns, anytime he gets his hands on a team, is going to improve the bullpen with the pitching lab and he's going to improve the team defense by acquiring guys who are better defensively and also positioning players much better. So if you want to know why the Mets have not overachieved, but performed so well under Stearns, it's improvements to the bullpen and the overall pitching staff and improvements to the team defensively, getting guys like Griffin Canning too, and Sean Manaea changing their arm angles, getting the most out of them. It's a very optimized organization for pitching development now, and then certainly for defensive value too. So under here, between two very, very, very good defensive teams. Cubs, my number one defensive team. The Mets, probably a top 10 defensive team. I make this 7.2, so under 7.5 to about -105 would be a bet for me.
Titans strike zones be damned. You're back with another under between Texas and Detroit. Skubal on the bump for the Tigers against the polarizing Patrick Corbin. Hey, Corbin has been pretty great lately. 1 or 2 runs allowed in 4 straight starts, and we know that they're trying to get him to the 5th or potentially the 6th inning. The question is, do you have confidence in the Rangers' pen, which hasn't been very good this year? Are they going to be able to suppress runs enough for this to go under 7.5, in your opinion?
I hope so, because their offense cannot score. So I think it really does come down to Corbin not getting shelled, and then the Rangers bullpen, hopefully not being down 4-0, 5-0, and saying, here's all of our B relievers for the rest of the game. Texas does need to keep this relatively tight. Corbin does need to keep this relatively tight to probably keep it under 7.5, but I make it 7.2. So again, another 7.5 to -105. Texas's offense, 25th on the year, 21st over the last 2 weeks. They've really struggled. They just got Langford back, Seager back, so they should perform a little bit better going forward. But I mean, they had to fire Donnie Ecker because it was going so poorly offensively. If their swing selection data is down, like overall, the process for this team, these guys seem to be aging out a little bit, like Semien. Some significant concerns about the Rangers offensively. As you mentioned, Corbin been pretty solid. He has a 3.8 expected FIP since the second half of last year. His expected ERA is 4.7, but it's been the cutter and the cutter usage. I discussed this previously this season, but he stopped throwing his fastball and his sinker as much as he did previously. I think it's down from about 70% to 30%, and he's exchanged a lot of those for cutters and sliders, and he's gotten much better results by throwing his worst stuff less often. I think Skubal is even more interesting to talk about. Skubal's numbers are through the roof this year relative to last year when he was the best pitcher in baseball. 2.2 ERA, 2.9 expected ERA, 2.5 expected FIP. All great, right? 27% strikeout minus walk rate, up about 2% from last year. But the pitch modeling metrics, his stuff plus is up from 112 to 119, location plus up from 100 to 111, and his body array is down from 325 to 2. Skubal, his best pitch is his changeup. 128 stuff plus on his changeup. He threw it 24% of the time last year, or threw it 24% of the time 2 years ago, up to 27% last year. Now it's his most off-selected pitch. He's throwing it 33% of the time this season. So Tarek Skubal said, I'm already very good. Why don't I throw my best pitch even more than all of my other pitches? And he has other very good pitches too, but the changeup is the best of the bunch. He's throwing it more often than anything else this year. And the underlying indicators say it's made him a better pitcher. So I don't know how you score runs off this guy unless he's completely off that day. It's impossible to put the bat on the ball against him. And the thing that impresses me most, anytime he's in a jam, he seems to be able to reach back for that little bit extra too that he needs in order to strike guys out. He's also able to manage his velocity, add and subtract based upon the situation and the need in that situation. So I'm very impressed by Tarek Skubal, watching him a bunch. The strand rate, he's a guy who will maintain a high strand rate like a Justin Verlander throughout his career. I talk about strand rate, BABIP regressing towards either league average or career average. Most of guys is league average. There are exceptions to that rule. And Tarek Skubal, Justin Verlander, these elite level pitchers are guys who can maintain a strand rate 75, 77% across their career instead of pushing closer to that 70% mark because they know how to strike guys out in big situations. So all that said, make the 7.2 under 7.5 to -105. And I think Skubal looks like the favorite. I'm not sure what the current odds are. I think Crochet pulled ahead of him at one point, but I would say Skubal should be a clear favorite for AL Cy Young at this point.
All right, we're halfway through the rest of your card here. 3 unders. Now we're going to turn to 3 overs. This could be a buy low moment on the Orioles lineup because they have not been hitting at all. They scored 4 runs in the last 3 games, getting swept by the Twins. but Kyle Hendricks is on the bump here, and he's in the twilight of his career. He's been hard hit this entire season. He's allowed a homer in 4 straight starts, and he has one of the least impressive fastballs of all the starters in Major League Baseball. So do you think Baltimore can tee off on him here and push this game over 9 against the Angels?
Yeah, a few overs after giving out a few unders. So I make this total about 9.9. This opened, I believe it was either this game or the Milwaukee game. I believe it was this game. FanDuel put out a 9.5 minus 105. Multiple other books put out 9 minus 115. If you see FanDuel above or below the rest of the market, assume that FanDuel is directionally correct on the total. They are the sharpest, I believe, in my opinion, of the domestic books, the most accessible domestic books. I'm not talking about Circa, talking about the most common ones. I do believe FanDuel tends to be more directionally correct on their totals and on their money lines, especially the openers, than the other books. So if you see FanDuel at 9.5 and everybody else is at 9, assume it's going to go up. If you see FanDuel at 9, everybody else is at 9.5, assume it's likely going to go down. So I was happy to take 9 minus 115 with, FanDuel sitting at 9.5 minus 105, making this total 10. As you mentioned, Kyle Hendricks is a replacement level starter, 4.8 expected ERA the past 2 seasons, 79 stuff plus this year's career low. He's been lucky though. 213 BABIP, 64. Well, the strand rate has not been lucky. 64% strand rate, but a 213 BABIP has prevented the amount of runners that are on base. The Angels have one of the worst bullpens in baseball, an ERA north of 7. The Nationals are the only team who's worse. Their underlying indicators, they're closer to 22nd, so they're still a bottom 10 bullpen. They're not quite as bad as that 70 ERA, but this is still not a good bullpen. The guy who I think is due for the blow up, though, is Tomoyuki Sugano, who has a 3 ERA, a 242 BABIP, a 91% strand rate, an expected ERA of 5.5. So nearly a 2.5 run difference between his actual and expected ERA. The FIP kind of splits the difference between the two, 4.5 expected FIP, but strikeout minus walk rate is below league average. It's near 8%. His body ERA is around 4.4, which is on the higher end for body ERA. That doesn't tend to scale as high as like the 5s, the 2s to the 5s. Body ERA tends to be 2 to 4.5, 2 to 5. It doesn't really get up into like the 6s or 7s as much for guys. So that's kind of on a lower scale, but I think you can safely say Sugano is not a 3 ERA type pitcher. He's at least a 4.5 guy, if not a 5.5 guy. And right now he's just been very lucky with the batting average on balls in play and the strand rate. And I don't think I mentioned it, but 85 degrees here at first pitch and 8-mile-an-hour winds blowing out to that goofy wall in right center field where you have to hit the ball above the line for it to be a homer, and then it bounces back into play, and then everybody's confused about it. It's like my least favorite feature in all ballparks in baseball is that right field wall in Anaheim where the ball bounces back in play, but it's a homer, and everybody's like confused for 10 seconds, and it happens like seemingly 3 times a week. So yeah, I like the over here. Up to 9.5. I'd say at minus 108 is where I'd cut it off. Preferred it obviously at the key number, but this should be a high scoring game, and got 2 more that are hopefully high scoring for you as well.
Milwaukee and Tampa, another over, and I have a feeling overs are going to heat up in general in Tampa, and a big part of it is the weather. So far this season, more unders have cashed at Steinbrenner Field, but it's hot, the wind's blowing out, and Zach Littell is on the bump, and he's been serving up meatballs this year. 8 dingers allowed in his last 5 starts alone. This total sitting at 9. Where would you play it up to?
Yeah, I make this 9.9, so another one to 9.5 minus 108 I think is fine. Again, 84 degrees here at first pitch, but warm. The real field temperature is 90. Normally I'm talking about real field in these games, and we're going from 55 to 50. This is 85 to 90. So it's going to be a little humid, 5-mile-an-hour winds blowing out. And we have now about a month of park factor data on Steinbrenner Field, on Sutter Health Park in Sacramento. I'm going to be very careful not to say the O word today. And Steinbrenner Field has played about 10% above the major league average in terms of run scoring, 11% in terms of hits, and 26% in terms of homers. It's basically been Great American Ballpark for home runs with the wind blowing out. And we discussed a lot the wind blowing out there versus in, and the dramatic effect it's going to have in Tampa relative to other parks because there's almost no structural shielding around the stadium. There's no second deck. There's no skyscrapers to block the wind. All of the effects of the wind will be felt, and will be felt almost doubly compared to every park except for Wrigley Field. And earlier in the year, the wind is going to be blowing out more. Later in the year, as we get closer to September, October, the wind is going to be blowing in more, especially at night. But right now, earlier in the season, the wind tends to blow out during the night, or is at least playing a little bit more fairly. So the wind jacked up my total here closer to 10. I think another key feature aside from Littell is the Rays. They blew that game yesterday against the Phillies, but they had to use Garrett Clevenger, Edwin Uceta, Peter Fairbanks, and Manuel Rodriguez all on back-to-back days. Their bullpen, even behind Littell, is pretty banged up tonight. The Brewers coming in off of an off day, a little bit more well-rested. Jose Quintana, though, not a guy I'm particularly high on either. Both Littell and Quintana kind of project around that 4.5 weighted ERA projection, like a very similar mark. You're slightly better than Sugano and Hendricks, but not much better, like a tier better than them, not 2 tiers. Still number 4 starting pitchers. So yeah, make the total 9.9, 9.5 up to minus 108. Rays bullpen tired and good hitting weather.
A golf clap for not calling them the Oakland Athletics, but I'd be remiss if I didn't bring one more Sacramento fun fact here. Did you know that Sacktown is the home of the Pony Express? They pioneered express mail using relay horse riders to go from Sacramento all the way to Missouri, so you got a piece of mail there in just a couple days, which was all the rage about 150 years ago. So impressive there from Sacramento in NorCal. Anyway, it's hot. The wind's blowing out. These pitchers aren't very good between the A's and the Yanks. I do know that the number is one of the highest on the board in terms of the total. So is this a pass for you, or are you interested in them scoring 12 or 13 runs in this one?
Yeah, this total's gone up. I bet this, I believe at 10 minus 115. It's now 10.5. Actually, this was another one where FanDuel was at 10.5 and the rest of the market was at 10. And I was like, trust the projection. I make this closer to 11. Just trust it. Because there's times where I'll make projections. For example, the Miami game today, the Miami-Chicago game, I believe. I was at like 7.5 and I just see the over 7.5 getting pounded. And I'm like, the weather seems neutral, if anything, pitcher friendly today. Like there's certain games where I don't get why the market's moving a certain direction, but I trust the market and I'll move off of a position I might otherwise take if I see that, such as the Miami game today. This game, made it 11, saw the 10s at the less sharp book, saw the 10.5 at the sharper book, said good enough for me. So 88 degrees of first pitch here, 4-mile-an-hour winds blowing out. Again, we have now about a month of park factor data in Sacramento, 121 run factor. So 21% above league average. It's right in between Coors Field and Fenway Park. Coors is about 125, Fenway is about 117. So playing somewhere between those two parks, 109 for hits, 119 for homers. Again, Fenway is about 114 for runs, Coors 125. In terms of homers, though, Fenway is like 2% below league average for homers. Coors is about 9% above. Great American Ballpark is 26% above. As I said, Tampa Bay has played 25% above for homers this year. Sacramento's played about 20% above. So it's not just the home runs. It's just, in general, an easier park to hit. The hit factor is way up. Also, this offense is very good. But that is not, leading itself into the park factors. It's comparing home and road performance. But yeah, I make this total around 11. As you said, the starting pitchers are not two I'm particularly high on. I show slight value on the Yankees for the first 5 innings. I think I made that minus 160. You can get minus 130 out there. So that's the only other way I'd consider betting on this game. But over 10.5, I think minus 110 I'd be comfortable with, would not go above that. And it might already be above that at this point. That I would have normally said like a first 5 over would be a way to target. I need more data on this. It's not something I have a ton of data on because we don't get new parks every year. I feel like there's something with teams going to a new park for the first time and having to adjust to the batter's eye there. Maybe early in those games, first at bat, like there's a reduction in potential production. Just anecdotal, just something I've thought about, nothing I can actually prove out yet. And I don't even know if we have a sufficient sample to be able to prove that out, unless I see, the first time that all 29 teams go to Sacramento this year, like how they actually perform over the first 3 innings of the game or whatever, and comparing that to the rest of the game. Like that'd be the only way I'd be able to flesh that out. And even that, I don't know if 29 games is a sufficient sample to measure that off of. But yeah, another over here. And hopefully the ball's flying in Sacramento. I've certainly tried and lost on a few unders there. We've cashed one or two, but I think this might be the first over I bet in Sacramento this season. Temperatures are just going to get warmer throughout the summer. We've discussed it quite a bit, but the average temperatures there are way higher than any other city where they play professional baseball or major league level professional baseball. So we're going to see some very high totals in Sacramento over the summer. I think even higher than Coors Field. We're going to see some 13s, maybe even some 13 and a halves once it gets really hot.
Let's zero in on the first inning for the most electrifying bet in sports. It's YRFI NRFI time. Billy, take it away.
Thanks, guys. I'm back with some NRFI and YRFI picks. Only 2 official picks today. I have one other one that I'm going back and forth on. Might play later, probably not. I'll touch on that at the end. So the first official pick I have is the YRFI in the Cardinals and Nationals game. Somewhere between minus 105 and minus 110, pretty much everywhere. So pick your favorite book. It's about the same. Just 2 pretty exploitable pitchers here. Eric Fetty has a 4.78 ERA on the season, and his underlying numbers say he's actually been lucky. They are mostly higher than that. But more importantly for the YRFI, his first time through the order ERA is 7 and change, which is obviously not very good, and he's allowed 10 earned runs in 12 innings, which has worked out to 3 YRFIs in his 7 starts. Just under half of them, but that's just him. That's without the other team being considered. And then Mitchell Parker, he's more of a bet on just kind of overall regression at this point. He has a 3.48 overall ERA. His FIP and some of his other underlying numbers are in the 5s. He has a 2% home run to fly ball ratio and a 223 batting average on balls in play. There's going to be some regression there. The Cardinals, top of the order isn't especially strong, but Parker has been very lucky. That luck has to run out at some point. And again, that's just half the equation. So between those 2 sides, I really like that. I'd play it to about minus 115, minus 120, unless the game total moves from 8.5 to 9. Then we get a little bit more leeway. We've started to see the over there get some steam. The other official pick, and it's been a while since we've been able to do this, but the Mariners NRFI. Mariners are home for the first time this month. They play in the best pitchers park in baseball by a long shot. 17% reduction in runs over the last 3 years. No other park is even half of that. The next closest is 8%. And we've got 2 very good pitchers. Luis Castillo's first time through the order ERA is 0.61. He's allowed 1 run all season when facing hitters for the first time. Kevin Gausman, not quite as good, but still very, very strong at 2.12 ERA in those seasons or in those situations. Those are unsustainable numbers, but a game at T-Mobile Park in Seattle is probably not where it turns around just because it is so pitcher-friendly. That is minus 135 at ESPN Bet, similar lines at a few other books. I'd play that to about minus 145. And again, this is another one where we might see the game total drop from the current 7.5, which would give me about 10 or 15 cents extra projected juice on the NRFI. And then one of the bets I've been on the fence about, have not made it myself, might make it if we get, a good lineup and or a rise in the game total. And that's the Tigers team YRFI. It's plus 205 at DraftKings. They're taking on Patrick Corbin. Patrick Corbin's underlying numbers suggest he has not gotten any better this year. He is still bad. He's still, a 5-ish ERA pitcher as he's been for the last half of a decade. But his ERA is just 3.28. He's a lockdown pitcher every time I've taken a YRFI against him this season. I've kind of sworn off him indefinitely until we see his, expected numbers start to converge with his actual numbers. The numbers like this one, especially if Spencer Torkelson gets a spot in the top 3 of the Tigers lineup, they are a top 5 lineup against lefties this season. Or top 5 lineup overall this season and even better against lefties. It makes a ton of sense. I'm just very gun-shy that Patrick Corbin maybe actually got superpowers from that spider bite. We will see. Again, if that one moves past the plus 205 at DraftKings, I would take it, or if we see a big jump in the game total. Other than that, that's it for me today. Good luck, everyone.
Appreciate it, Billy. That'll do it for today's episode of Payoff Pitch. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to tail some of the bets that you heard from Sean or Billy in today's episode, look for the quick slip link in the episode description. And don't forget to download the award-winning Action Network app and leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to the pod. Also, check out the Action Network Discord. You can cut it up with action experts as well as Major League Baseball betting enthusiasts. We'll see you back here on Monday for more best bets. And don't forget, that show will be live on Monday on the Action Network YouTube page. So be be sure to be there on time to get the absolute best numbers for your Monday card. For Sean Zerillo, I'm Mike Calabrese. Thanks for listening to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast. And of course, best of luck with all your bets.